Today I'm going to demonstrate how to do split stitch and chain stitch. Both of these stitches create thick continuous lines that may look similar, as you see here, where the left is split stitch and the right is chain stitch, but chain stitch is usually wider and more open, and they're stitched in very different ways. Here you can see 3 lines of split stitch and 3 lines of chain stitch, both made with the same number of strands, so you can really see that difference in more closed and narrow on the split stitch and a little bit more open and wide on the chain stitch. So we've got the completed split stitch here on the left and chain stitch on the right, and we're just going to make a new line to show you how it works below here. So first, let's do the line in split stitch. And split stitch is usually done with an even number of strands, so I've got 4 strands on my needle. We're going to just come up with the needle at the start of the line, go forward 1 stitch length like you were making a straight stitch, but now instead of moving forward, we're going to come up again through the middle of the stitch we just made. That's where split gets its name. You're splitting your stitch each time to give it that width. So now we're going to again go forward a stitch length, come up and split the stitch that we just made. And most of the time your needle wants to come up right in the middle. I've got a little awkward angle here, so I can't tell if I am or not. But I'll show you a trick. So you go forward a stitch length, we come up again to split in our stitch. And if we weren't sure or we were having a hard time finding it, you can use the blunt end of another needle to basically separate out your strands and see if you seem to be getting lopsided, where you're ending up with 1 stitch on one side. So see, you can take this end of the needle of another needle if you're having a hard time and look to just make sure that you're getting 2 stitches on one side and 2 stitches on the other side. But like I said, most of the time, the needle seems to want to come up through the middle of your stitch anyway, so it tends to work out. And when you get to the end of a line of split stitch, I came up through the middle again, and I'm just going to go down at the end of that stitch. Now let's do a chain stitch where we'll form links like a chain rather than splitting the stitch. So again, we're going to come up at the start of the line, but instead of going forward to make a stitch, we're going to go back down through the same hole that we just came out of, and we're going to leave a loop rather than pulling our thread tight. Come forward 1 stitch length and bring your needle up through your loop. This is how we form a link in the chain. If you've done the lazy daisy stitch, this will look a bit like a lazy daisy petal, and like we're making just a series of petals that will interlink. And we do the same thing over and over again. So instead of going forward a stitch, we are going to go back down that same hole. So we're putting our needle inside the link we just made. And again, we're going to leave ourselves a loop instead of pulling tight. Go forward a stitch length to come up inside that loop. Come back down inside that loop in the same hole. Leave yourself a loop. Go forward 1 stitch length to come up through your loop. So now we've got our 3rd link. Going to come down again through that same link. And when you get to your last link, instead of going back down inside the link, just like you do to tack down the end of a lazy daisy, we're just going to stitch just outside of that last link to pull him down. So you can see the difference between split stitch on the left and chain stitch on the right. Both can be used for lines, but chain stitch is also often used for fill. So for instance, if you look at this yellow circle here, that is basically a spiral of chain stitch filling a shape. And that's it for split stitch and chain stitch. Thanks for watching.